Vault 12. This vault appears in Fallout 1 and was built under the city of Bakersfield. It was promoted as having every comfort and even a water system that could produce 15,000 gallons of clean water per day, but there was a dark secret the residents never knew. They were actually test subjects in vault-tec's radiation experiment. The company deliberately designed the vault to let radiation seep in, just to see what long-term exposure would do to people. To make sure that happened, they built the door so it would never seal properly. So when the bombs fell on October 23, 2077, people from Bakersfield rushed inside, thinking they would be safe, but instead the broken door let the radiation leak in constantly, and the supposed shelter became a slow, cruel experiment in forced mutation. The outcome was tragic. As expected, many died quickly from the radiation exposure, but even worse, some of the inhabitants turned into ghouls. Some were feral and mindless, and others still aware and conscious, but trapped in their rotting bodies. When the Vault Dweller later discovers this place in Fallout, they find Necropolis, a ruined city built by the survivors who left their poisoned vault behind. While Vault 12's cruelty is undeniable, it relied on a single design flaw rather than multiple layers of manipulation, which we'll find later in the list. And for that reason, Vault 12 is ranked here. Vault 87. If radiation exposure seems terrible, wait until you hear about what vault-tec did with the FEV, or the Forced Evolutionary Virus, in Fallout 3. And Vault 87 was the center of what was going to be released into the world. Construction on this vault began in 2066 and finished in 2071, initially planned for a different social experiment before being converted into a secondary research center for FEV testing. Unlike Vault 12's passive radiation exposure, Vault 87's experiments were actively conducted by Dr. Wayne Merrick and his staff through the Evolutionary Experimentation Program. The vault's overseer and security guards were fully aware of the horrific nature of what they were doing, but they strictly followed vault-tec's orders. The FEV experiments began systematically exposing residents to the virus, documenting their agonizing transformation into super mutants. Subjects experienced excruciating pain as their bones stretched, muscles expanded, and skin changed texture. Both male and female subjects became sterile, but alongside that, they also developed thicker, more resilient skin after 10 days and increased upper body strength in males. However, the process caused severe mental deterioration, increased anxiety and rage that ultimately required all subjects to be terminated after just 14 days. The situation became catastrophic when mutated test subjects broke free after a year, overwhelming the security forces and either driving out or transforming the remaining vault dwellers. When the Lone Wanderer discovered Vault 87, they found it overrun by super mutants who had been kidnapping wastelanders for nearly 200 years, continuing the FEV experiments until their supply finally ran out. Vault 87 has a more straightforward horror, a single relentless experiment, which is why it's ranked here. Vault 95. Found in Fallout 4, Vault 95 is one of vault-tec's cruelest experiments, built to take advantage of people struggling with addiction and trying to recover. They marketed this facility as a supposed rehabilitation center for people suffering from chemical addiction, presenting it as a place where they could finally overcome their dependencies and build new lives. They even ran it as a real rehab for 5 years, with residents slowly making progress in recovery. But this success was all part of vault-tec's cruel design. Hidden among the residents was a planted agent whose job was to document the community's response when the real experiment began. On October 23, 2082, exactly 5 years after the vault was sealed, this agent waited until the population was asleep and opened a massive hidden stash of drugs and alcohol that had been secretly stored in the living quarters. The revelation of this cache immediately destroyed the family-like bonds the residents had built over 5 years of recovery. Some succumbed to their urges immediately, while others tried to resist, but eventually gave in to cope with the unfolding violence and chaos. When the sole survivor discovered Vault 95 in 2287, with skeletons in vault suits scattered throughout the drug stash and surrounding areas, it's clear that the vault quickly collapsed due to overdoses and infighting. Vault 95 earns its rank because it preyed on people at their most vulnerable, exploiting those who trusted it as a place of recovery. Vault 92. The experiment in Vault 92 targeted some of society's most creative and talented individuals under the guise of preserving musical talent during the Great War. The world's best musicians were invited to this vault, believing they would help safeguard humanity's cultural heritage while waiting out the nuclear apocalypse. Construction finished in 2068, and the vault was equipped with extensive sound equipment, musical instruments, and recording gear to support its supposed cultural preservation mission. The 245 musicians at first thrived in the vault, building friendships and continuing to make music in the studios. However, Vault 92 had a sinister secondary purpose. Overseer Richard Rubin began implementing the classified White Noise Mind Suggestion Combat Experimentation Program designed to test whether combat suggestions could be implanted in human subjects through modulated ultra-low frequency white noise. It began with small trials. Musicians were placed in soundproof booths, while faint layers of white noise played beneath their music. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The only clues were strange, little sounds coming from their instruments and equipment. The tests looked promising, so Rubin expanded the project. Speakers across the entire vault were fitted with white noise emitters, and all personal music devices were taken away. From then on, every resident could only hear vault-provided audio. According to Professor John Malleus, about 1/3 of residents slipped into trance-like states, becoming highly suggestible and easy to control, but the effect soon turned deadly. Over time, the white noise caused dizziness, sickness, and eventually violent breakdowns. The musicians of Vault 92 turned on each other in madness. When the lone wanderer arrived, the vault was flooded and silent. Vault 112. Hidden beneath Smith Casey's garage in Fallout 3, this vault represents one of vault-tec's most psychologically twisted experiments. It was one of the last constructed, finished in 2074, and was designed specifically to house Dr. Stanislaus Brown, the creator of the Garden of Eden creation kit, along with 85 other carefully selected residents. The vault's stated purpose seemed almost utopian. Residents would be suspended in tranquility loungers connected to a virtual reality simulation, allowing them to live perfect lives in a digital paradise forever. The advanced life support systems would keep their bodies in perfect stasis, while their minds experienced an endless virtual existence. What the residents didn't know was that Dr. Braun had complete control over their simulated world, and they had no means of leaving on their own. Initially, Braun may have genuinely intended to create virtual havens for the residents, but his godlike power within the simulation eventually corrupted him completely. After becoming bored with peaceful virtual worlds, Braun began using the simulation as his personal torture chamber. For over 200 years, Braun subjected the trapped residents to endless cycles of psychological and physical torment within the virtual environment. He killed them over and over, then wiped their memories clean before starting the process again. The residents experienced every sensation as if it were real, feeling genuine pain and terror. But they could never truly die or escape unless the lone wanderer chooses to initiate the kill switch, actually killing the residents as an act of mercy and leaving Braun in the virtual reality by himself forever. This vault ranks high because Braun's torment was endlessly cruel and deliberately evil. The experiment here wasn't about testing the residents at all. It was really about giving Braun free rein to indulge his sadism, which makes it one of vault-tec's darkest choices. Vault 75. Vault 75 in Fallout 4 is one of vault-tec's most morally reprehensible experiments, as it targeted the most vulnerable members of society, children. Presented to the public as a safe haven for students in case of nuclear war, families were even offered subsidized admission to encourage high enrollment. When the bombs fell, every designated family with a student at the school made it to the vault in time, but upon entering, the children were immediately separated from their parents and escorted to the atrium under the pretense of orientation. In reality, the adults were executed by the security staff the moment they were separated from their children, leaving the kids completely alone and unaware of their parents' fate. The children were raised in isolation, taught to fear the horrors of Uptopland, the vault's nickname for the post-war surface world. This was a complete lie designed to keep them compliant during their development. Vault 75's true purpose was the refinement of human genetics through selective breeding, genetic modification, and hormonal treatments. The children were essentially livestock in a breeding program designed to create superior human specimens. When they reached 18, the most intelligent and physically exceptional were harvested for their genetic material, a process that involved organ harvesting and the storage of biological specimens. Those who showed intelligence and obedience but weren't deemed genetically superior enough for harvesting were recruited into the Vault's science team, becoming complicit in the continued experimentation on new generations. The children who were considered insufficient were killed during a mock graduation ceremony, their bodies incinerated afterward. By 2287, when the sole survivor discovered the vault, it had been taken over by gunners, with evidence suggesting the experiments only ended when a rebellion among the test subjects finally brought the horrific program to a close. The vault ranks very high on my list because they literally conducted experiments on innocent children. Vault 108. This is one of the strangest and most chaotic vaults ever created, because vault-tec didn't settle on just one experiment. Instead, they packed multiple catastrophic scenarios into one location, seemingly designed to see what would cause the Vault Society to collapse first. Construction began in 2061 but was cut short in 2069 due to work stoppages, leaving the Vault in a compromised state from the beginning. The Vault was designed to house 475 residents for 38 years, but vault-tec deliberately created multiple points of failure. First, they intentionally left all standard positions unfilled, giving the Overseer complete power to assign roles arbitrarily. However, they specifically selected Brody Jones as Overseer, a man with a genetic predisposition to a rare cancer that would kill him within 3 years, guaranteeing a power vacuum very early in the Vault's life. Second, the primary power supply was programmed to fail after just 20 years, with a backup system insufficient to power the entire Vault. Third, the Vault was stocked with 3 times the normal amount of weapons while lacking standard entertainment, creating a powder keg of armed, bored residents. The last and most disturbing element was an active cloning experiment. Scientists within the vault began cloning a man named Gary, documenting how each successive clone became increasingly violent and hostile to non-clones. By the time they reached Gary 54, the clones had become so aggressive they were injuring the research staff during examinations. When the lone wanderer discovered Vault 108, they found it inhabited entirely by Gary clones, dozens of identical aggressive beings who could only say the word Gary and attack anyone who wasn't a clone. The perfect storm of violence in Vault 108 almost wins at the top spot, but we have something even worse. Vault 11. Found in Fallout New Vegas, Vault 11 is vault-tec's ultimate psychological experiment. The residents were told that every year they had to sacrifice one person, or everyone in the vault would die, but this was completely false. If the residents had refused to sacrifice anyone, the vault's computer would have congratulated them for their commitment to human life and unlocked the vault door, allowing free passage to the surface. But the fate of Vault 11 turned out to be the exact opposite. The residents, believing their survival depended on annual murder, established a democratic system where they elected an overseer who would then be executed at the end of their term. Everyone began fighting to avoid election, trying to nominate the worst possible candidates since that person would die. This backfired catastrophically, as electing terrible leaders meant living under their rule for a year before their execution. Political blocs emerged to manipulate the voting process, reaching its breaking point when Catherine Stone was coerced by the Justice Bloc, who then betrayed her by nominating her husband anyway. In desperation, Catherine killed the Justice Bloc members, got herself elected overseer, and changed the system to random selection. This triggered a civil war that destroyed nearly everyone in the vault. When only 5 residents remained, they finally decided to refuse the sacrifice demand. The computer then delivered its pre-recorded message, congratulating them for choosing human dignity over survival, and revealing that no one would have died if they had simply refused from the beginning. 4 of the 5 survivors, overwhelmed by the realization that they had killed their friends and neighbors for 16 years over a lie, took their own lives. Only one person walked away from Vault 11, carrying the weight of this ultimate betrayal of human trust and morality. What made this vault the most disturbing was how the experiment completely corrupted human nature. It turned its residents into killers, demonstrating how easily fear can transform ordinary people into monsters willing to sacrifice others to save themselves. And the worst part is, it was all a lie. Unlike the other vaults, vault-tec sat back and watched the dwellers do it to themselves. Thanks for sticking around and watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate a like, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so we can hang out again in the next one.